My name is Leslie Lawton, and I'm the president of the Sunnyvale Historical Society. I'd like to welcome all of you today. Thank you very, very much for coming. If you haven't been to our museum, please feel free to walk around this very, very interesting exhibit and take a tour downstairs of our museum. And please come back and see us as often as you can. If you have been to our museum before, welcome back. Thank you very, very much for coming. I'd like to introduce a couple of people to you. We have some Northrop people in our audience, but we have a couple of people from Northrop that I'd like to introduce to you, and they will take a few minutes to talk about their responsibilities and some of the history of Northrop, etc., Hendy and Westinghouse. And the first person I would like to introduce to you is somebody near and dear to my heart, because he's the director of the Hendy Iron Man Museum at Northrop Grumman, Eric Thomas.
Thank you. So we can hear. I'm a pretty loud talker. Well, hello everyone. Thanks for being here, and thanks to Laura Babcock and her museum team and the Sunnyvale Historical Society and Museum Association for hosting the rotational display this summer. It's my privilege to say a few words at this reception celebrating 100 years of business in Sunnyvale. To note some of the earlier historical highlights of the Hendy Ironworks and the Westinghouse Marine Division, and then yield to Russ Farman, who will talk about recent history, including the current owner, Northrop Grumman Marine Systems, who is my employer too. But first, I must dispel a rumor. Several months ago, walking home from work, I stopped by the Firehouse Microbrewery downtown on Murphy Street for a cold Pepsi, and I struck a conversation with the man sitting at the bar, and the exchange led us to talk about our careers. I told him I worked at the old plant nearby, and he answered me with a puzzled look and squinted eyes and said, "I thought that was a juvenile detention center." So I laughed nervously and told him it was still an important machine shop and a great national asset. Although top sections of our perimeter barbed wire fence do lean into our facility. I conceded to myself only that this rumor serves as a credible alternative cover story to keep our business under the radar, so to speak. Beware, O wayward youth. There is a little immaturity exhibited by some of our younger employees, but the place I work is certainly not a juvenile detention center. This amazing business concern is the longest continuous heavy machining operation on the west coast of the United States, the largest heavy machine shop west of the Mississippi River, and the fourth largest in America. Compared to the many high-tech companies that reside campus-style in Sunnyvale and in the vicinity, the downtown Marine Systems facility seems to be a relic of the industrial age. We've been through every up and down turn of the economy, and to some of our neighbors, they think we have been closed for years. Hard to promote that alternative cover story when there are so many cars parked out front. So we are open 24 hours a day, making precision products on 3 shifts. It can take 3 years to build, 2 to 3 years to build complex state-of-the-art equipment. To continuously operate specialized machinery takes discipline, experience, competence, mentoring, and knowledge transfer. I'm very proud of our world-class engineering department, including the manufacturing engineers who make challenging designs come to life. Our site is a national mechanical engineering landmark and is renowned for innovation and invention, where creativity springs from every department. A hands-on welding supervisor in World War II invented Healy arc welding. We practice precision under careful and deliberate methods, and it's very difficult to add metal once you've taken too much away. So you got to be careful of this business. Production scheduling is an art form. As for the end product, we currently build very reliable, high-performance propulsion and power generation equipment for submarines and aircraft carriers. We also build missile launchers. We don't build products that are obsolete on the day of release. Our equipment is built to last 30 to 50 years. We are the innovators, and we protect our trade secrets. As Admiral Obvious might say, for crucial reasons, the United States Navy will not outsource this important work to China. This industrial institution helped to establish the city of Sunnyvale. Victory villages sprung up around the plant in World War II to house the thousands of workers. And it all began in 1856 with the incorporation of the Joshua Hendy Iron Works. In 1849, Joshua Hendy, a blacksmith and British immigrant from Houston, Texas, moved to San Francisco during the gold rush to become one of California's most successful 19th century industrialists. He capitalized on the evolution of mining methods, which required complicated machinery, and with so many innovations and improvements over the competition, Hendy was soon a leader in the field. He produced variations of both mining equipment and procedures that are still worldwide standards. The giant monitor, which is really the hydraulic nozzle, was both famous and infamous, and I'm sure people have heard of that. The mining and milling business thrived, making ore cars and elevators, stamp mills and crushers, with the designs eventually morphing into equipment sales to the concrete industry in the early part of the 20th century. He started, so most of the concrete and the construction was Hendy crushers and equipment that created the concrete. He started the Benicia sawmill within 2 months of arriving in San Francisco, which was the first redwood sawmill in California. He owned redwood lumber and mining interests. Hendy also built equipment for sawmills, dairy, ships, and utility infrastructure. The first redwood barge line that came down the coast brought logs to Benicia, eventually was sold to Standard Oil Shipping. The 3rd Street drawbridge next to AT&T Park is still operational to this day. Joshua Hendy retired to Sonoma County, remaining active. Once a month, he would oil a local sawmill's Hendy equipment. He'd show up, and just because he felt he was probably the most qualified to do it, and he did it as a free service. His nephews Sam and John Hendy took over in 1891 after his passing. In 1906, the Hendy Company moved to Sunnyvale after the Great Quake. The land was given free to Hendy, and Hendy dug the first city deep well and water supply. With the added capacity, Hendy expanded to markets throughout the Pacific Rim. In World War I, they built triple expansion engines and added turbines to their line, amongst other new products like floating dredges for building ports and levees. Boulder and Grand Coulee dams used Hendy equipment. The Depression years were lean. They had a fruit and vegetable stand and 25 people on staff at the low point. 250 people were employed by 1940, so it was starting to pick up. In 1941, the 6 companies, which included Bechtel and Kaiser, bought Hendy, and Charles Moore, who was a small machine salesman who had convinced them to buy the plant, became the general manager. He was a bigger-than-life character. You might see some pictures in the exhibition. He secured the Liberty Ship contract 2 days after Pearl Harbor, and because they still had the World War I triple expansion engine patterns and drawings, so they convinced the Defense Department that they could start working the moment the contract was signed, which they did. As soon as it was signed, he called the division and said, "Get to work." So in World War II, there were 10,000 employees working here. They built 754 Liberty Ship engines. And in 3.5 years, that was 1 a day. And these are essentially 3-story high engines, which is a world record. They supplied 25 shipyards in the Bay Area. And using a Westinghouse license, they built cargo ship turbine and gear units. They also built turbine generator sets, DC generators, torpedo launch tubes, rocket launchers, and diesel engines. The following motto appeared on placards throughout the plant at the time. The difficult things can be done right away. The impossible will take a little longer. Senator Harry Truman and his team of auditors visited Hendy in 1943 on Truman's Ferret Out the Supplier Corruption Tour and discovered that Hendy was not ethically challenged after all, and that it was not gouging the Defense Department. He was actually quite impressed with the division. The Hendy factory was awarded the E Award in 1945, given to only 5 suppliers in the Bay Area out of hundreds of candidates. In 1947, Westinghouse purchased the Hendy facility and gained a foothold on the West Coast. The rest of the Hendy business, the mining and milling, was sold to Kearney Foundry in San Jose at approximately the same time. So Westinghouse wanted a foothold on the West Coast to sell transformers to PG&E. As you probably well know, that we were really growing in this state. And so they bought the facility. They knew they could do other things there. They moved the turbine line there from Philadelphia in the mid-1950s. All the engineers and the records came. And it was in the late 50s that the missile launching program started and continues to produce the #1 most reliable weapon system in history, never having failed in a test or real launch. Westinghouse built the Polaris, Poseidon, and Trident launch systems, and nuclear propulsion and telescopes, the time-life printing presses in the early 50s, packaging machines, switchgears, panel boards, and home heaters, believe it or not. Since 1996, the facility has been owned by Northrop Grumman. We now build silent propulsion and power equipment, and we now maintain unique shop machinery, some of which are the largest of their kind in the world, about half a dozen of our machines at least. Being that I am speaking inside of a wonderful museum, I'd like to acknowledge museum volunteers and collectors everywhere, and the value of museums in general. Not everyone can be engaged in preserving history. It's a DNA kind of thing, unless one counts personal memories as a contribution, which I do. A museum depends on the thoughtfulness of those who preserve and remember that the past is where we come from. Otherwise, civilization maintains a shallow perspective made of instant analysis and the stress of the moment. We have to look back to see what kind of solid material we are made of. Please come and visit the Iron Man Museum sometime, located inside the Northrop Grumman facility. I'm very encouraged that Americans respect the past. Last year, 150 million people attended professional sporting events in the United States, while 850 million people visited museums. I want to personally thank all of you for caring.